This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Yuwat. It's Monday, April 19th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. We begin in North Africa, where at least 11 people were killed and 98 others injured in a train derailment on Sunday in the Delta city of Toukh, north of the Egyptian capital, Cairo, according to the health ministry. Freddie Joyner of Reuters has the latest.
At least 11 people were killed and nearly 100 injured on Sunday in a train accident in Egypt's Kaliubia province north of Cairo, according to a statement by the health ministry. Eyewitness Medhat Abdel Raouf stood in disbelief.
We don't know what happened exactly. The carriages derailed. Many people died. There are many people under the derailed carriages and we cannot get them out. We don't know what to say. We are tired. There have been 4 train accidents in 1 month.
Egyptian National Railways released a statement that said the train was heading from Cairo to the Nile Delta city of Mansoura when 4 carriages derailed at 1:54 p.m., about 25 miles north of Cairo. The cause of the accident is being investigated. More than 50 ambulances took the injured to 3 hospitals in the province. The derailing is the latest of several recent railway crashes in Egypt. At least 20 people were killed and nearly 200 were injured in March when 2 trains collided near Tata, about 275 miles south of Cairo. 15 people were injured this month when 2 train carriages derailed near Minya al-Qam city. Egypt's transportation minister has faced calls to resign from some Egyptians on social media. He has rejected these and vowed to keep working on developing the aging rail network.
That report by Freddie Joyner of Reuters. A wildfire on the slopes of South Africa's Table Mountain forced University of Cape Town students to evacuate on Sunday as runaway flames set several campus buildings ablaze and firefighters used helicopters to waterbomb the area. The fire started early on Sunday near a memorial to politician Cecil Rhodes, located on Devil's Peak, another part of Cape Town's mountainous backdrop, before spreading rapidly up the slopes. The smoke could be seen 4 kilometers away. Some roads were closed and fire alerts were sent to mountain hikers. The university, ranked among the best on the continent, is largely built on the slopes of Devil's Peak and is situated close to where the fire started. The United States has ordered its non-essential staff in charge to leave the African country as rebel fighters approached the capital on Sunday. This after early election results showed President Idriss Deby on course to extend his 3-decade rule. Deby, who seized power in 1990 at the head of an armed rebellion, is a staunch ally of France and the United States in the fight against Islamist militants in the arid Sahel region. Large numbers of heavily armed charged security forces were patrolling the streets of the capital on Sunday morning, according to a Reuters witness. Closing arguments begin Monday in Minnesota in the case of a white former police officer accused of murder and manslaughter in the May 2020 death of George Floyd, an African-American in police custody. Michelle Quinn has more on the tension surrounding the case.
Minneapolis and other cities across the United States are bracing for a decision in the case of former police officer Derek Chauvin. In some areas, security is being stepped up as Chauvin waits to learn his fate in the case that led to protests around the world. He faces years in prison if convicted.
The outcome that we pray for in Derek Chauvin is for him to be held criminally liable for killing George Floyd, because we believe that could be a precedence of finally making America live up to its promise of liberty and justice for all.
Prosecutors called witnesses who said Floyd died because Chauvin pinned his knee to the back of Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, depriving him of oxygen. Witnesses say Floyd repeatedly gasped that he could not breathe. One defense expert contends Floyd died from a heart attack brought on by high blood pressure and underlying drug use. Chauvin arrested Floyd on suspicion of passing a counterfeit $20 bill in May of last year. Police departments across the United States find themselves in a difficult position, preparing for protests that are about policing itself. That is especially true in cities such as Ferguson, Missouri, which has seen police-involved deaths of Black people.
It's a difficult situation for us to deal with, and we're all watching the trial to see, how things unfold with it, and with the understanding that if Derek Chauvin is not held accountable, that we probably will see, an outpouring of frustration from that verdict if it does go that way.
Frustration and anger about Floyd's death and that of other minorities in cases involving law enforcement come as a bipartisan group of congressional leaders discusses a police reform bill. The George Floyd Justice and Police Act, which would ban chokeholds and set up a national registry of police misconduct and other measures, passed the House of Representatives in March with no Republican support. To pass the Senate, it will need the support of at least 10 Republicans. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
Strategic competition with China was one of the main issues discussed in President Joe Biden's Friday meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, the first foreign leader to visit the White House since Biden took office. White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this report.
A reaffirmation of U.S.-Japan alliance for a free and open Indo-Pacific by Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga and President Joe Biden at the White House on Friday.
We committed to working together to take on the challenges from China and on issues like the East China Sea, the South China Sea, as well as North Korea.
Suga is the first foreign leader to visit in person, a testament to the Biden administration's foreign policy priority.
Our alliance has served its role as the foundation of peace and stability for the Indo-Pacific region and the world.
The leaders committed to assist vaccination efforts in the region and pledged aggressive actions on climate change, including advancing clean energy technologies. Suga will attend a virtual leaders summit on climate hosted by Biden next week.
And help nations throughout the Indo-Pacific region, especially developing countries, develop renewable energies and decarbonize their economies.
The decades-old U.S.-Japan security alliance is based on a post-World War II treaty where the U.S. pledges to defend Japan, including with its nuclear umbrella. In exchange, Japan hosts over 20 U.S. military bases, enhancing American military posture in the region. The summit came amid increasing Chinese military pressure on Taiwan, but neither Biden nor Suga gave detailed comments on the issue.
Both governments understand that this is a delicate moment in the relationship with China, that they don't want to incite or provoke activities that they don't desire. But on the other hand, they want to be firm about the U.S.-Japan alliance being fully functioning in any case, in any moment of threat to themselves or to the region.
Biden and Suga focused on economic cooperation, including finding alternatives to the 5G network of Chinese firm Huawei and ways to diversify supply chains seen as over-reliant on Beijing. Chinese human rights issues, including Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, were also discussed. Beijing has expressed serious concerns over what it described as U.S.-Japan's negative moves and collusion against it. Suga promoted Tokyo's role as host of the pandemic-delayed Olympic Games, now less than 100 days away. Questions remain on whether the Games can be held safely, given a resurgence of the coronavirus in Japan.
Tokyo has assured us they will keep in close contact with Washington as their plans develop, but I don't have any more beyond that.
Prior to meeting Biden, Suga continued the tradition of Japanese leaders paying respect at the tomb of the unknown soldier in Arlington National Cemetery, a gesture of goodwill between two countries who were once the fiercest of enemies, now the best of friends. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
Muslims are currently observing the holy month of Ramadan, but with COVID restrictions still in place, mosques have had to grapple with how to keep worshippers safe. VOA's Alam Burhanan has the details in this report narrated by Nova Howadi.
This is the second Ramadan taking place during the COVID-19 pandemic that is affecting Muslims around the world. But unlike last year, Muslims in the U.S. can congregate for prayer in person at mosques while observing local guidelines. This is the case at Imam Center in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C.
The regulation laid out by the county our mosque is in, Montgomery County, allows all houses of worship to increase their capacity to 50%. This means around 200 worshippers can pray here. Of course, we follow health protocols like mandating masks and checking everyone's temperature.
It's a similar situation in a mosque in Detroit, Michigan. Mosques are open again for the 5 daily prayers and also for the nightly congregational prayer through Ramadan, the Taraweeh.
Even though we have that, we're still spacing out. We are going to have some in-person Taraweeh prayers. And so those are going to be spaced out still with masks and, limited in terms of capacity.
To limit the size of the congregation, many mosques have barred children from attending. At Imam Center, they are also limiting congregants to adult men only.
When we were fully open before the pandemic, we could accommodate 500 or even 600 people. And because demand is now so high due to having spent a year without stepping foot in a mosque, we have a lot of enthusiastic worshippers who want to come back. Whether Indonesian Muslims or non-Indonesians, we had to prioritize.
The Muslim community of West Suburban Detroit is taking a different approach.
So, we're definitely planning for fairly equal capacity for the men and the women, but we'll see. Obviously, as time goes on, and if we have to adjust accordingly, meaning we're going to keep space for the women regardless. But in terms of the actual utilization and space and stuff, we'll see.
Both mosques stream the prayer so that worshippers at home can still tune in to the nightly sermon.
So, inshallah, the Prophet Muhammad.
What hasn't changed from last year are religious studies and other activities, which continue online. While iftar, or the communal breaking of the fast, is now drive-through only. Congregants pick up sweets and food to break their fasts at home. For VOA's Alam Burhanan, I'm Nova Purwadi, VOA.
When New York City schools switched to remote learning in the spring of 2020 because of the pandemic shutdown, Stuyvesant High School students launched a unique web platform to help struggling kids catch up. Elena Wolf has this story, narrated by Anna Rice.
When the COVID-19 pandemic forced New York City schools to switch to remote learning, Stuyvesant High School student Christian Nguyen saw his little brothers struggling to adjust.
My brothers are 12 and 10 years old. They're at home and they were really struggling with the transition from in-person school to online school.
5 and 2/7 plus 3 and 1/7. How would you solve that problem?
So first you do 5 plus 3 equals 8. And then you do 2 7s plus 1 7 equals 3 7s. So that'll be 8 and 3 7s.
Yeah, that's right.
Christian lives in a Brooklyn neighborhood where a lot of families can't afford an iPad or internet at all, let alone private tutors. Given the situation, Nguyen and his classmates realized they could be the solution.
We kind of just wanted to give back to the community. And we also recognized that, coming from a specialized high school in Manhattan, we had a lot of privilege, and we kind of wanted to, relay that privilege and those same educational opportunities to, students who might not get the same help that we do,
That's how the EDUCOVE platform came to be. The high schoolers created a website where kids who are struggling academically can find free tutors and mentors from high schools in the city.
The coordinators were so smart. They put out a survey asking sort of like the interests of your child so that they could match your child's interests with one of their tutors. So Ezekiel also had like a vast knowledge of superheroes and comic books, in addition to being a math whiz. So there was a way for them to easily connect the content area and interests, right? Yeah.
It's not just the kids that realize they can give back. Parents also learned a lesson about how to solve problems in their community.
We can't always rely on our politicians and our government agencies to take care of us, right? That we're going to need to develop a certain level of independence and mutual aid in order to survive and thrive. So this tutoring program was something that grew out of a need, and I think will continue.
And it did continue. Following the EDUCOVE example, multiple similar platforms mushroomed during the pandemic.
We've received some phenomenal feedback, kids making tremendous progress, and it really makes me proud to see the kids being able to progress past where they were in the beginning.
For Eliana Wolf in New York, Anna Rice, VOA News.
We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, doctors struggle to save the lives of Yemen's starving children. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. In the US, senior citizens and other vulnerable populations without access to technology have struggled to make COVID-19 vaccination appointments with online booking systems. Matt Debo reports on the nationwide network of tech-savvy volunteers who are taking on the challenge.
It must be Natalie Cole.
Retired teacher Trudy Hoffaker likes to complete 5 crossword puzzles a day. But when it came to the puzzle of booking a second COVID-19 vaccine appointment, she was stumped. Her healthcare provider had just run out of vaccine supply. She had to look elsewhere, and time was running out.
There are many people in my age group who aren't online, who aren't computer savvy.
While about 30% of people in the U.S. are fully vaccinated, according to Johns Hopkins University, challenges in reaching the most vulnerable populations remain. Reliance on online booking systems has created obstacles for seniors and others who may lack computer access or the spare time to search for appointments. Fortunately for Trudy, help came from Michael Brockman, a 23-year-old neighbor who works at a major tech company.
Hi Trudy, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Michael got busy searching sites, but it wasn't easy for him either.
And finally, I said, Michael, give it a rest. You know, we can look at it tomorrow. But he could barely sleep that night, he told me, you know. And the next morning, at about 8 or 8:30 the next morning, he called me and he said, I've got an appointment for you.
Michael started out hunting for appointments for friends and relatives, but is now a volunteer with Vaccine Ferry, a nonprofit that finds appointments across the U.S.
On weekends when I'm not working during my day job, I can do, close to 100 appointments. I think the most I've done, it was like 14 appointments in half an hour.
Vaccine Ferry, which is free to use, was founded by Caitlin Hertel after she experienced how hard it was to set up appointments for her parents.
In the middle of the night, I just decided to get started. And one night we got up and running, and the next day I already had requests. And I had volunteers signed up.
1 month later, the network has booked more than 10,000 appointments in 47 states, an indication of how great the need is, and not only among seniors.
We had an influx of teachers. We had an influx of parents with young children. We have our Spanish form up and running. We're talking about getting a Chinese form up and running. There's one.
The volunteers share tips and encourage each other.
Midnight in your local time zone is really the biggest time to get an appointment. We have hundreds of volunteers up at all hours of the night. I like to say that it's a treasure hunt and I'm Indiana Jones. Again, no second dose appointments. It can be very frustrating and discouraging, but when you finally book that appointment, it's just so rewarding.
And this gentleman is all set for this upcoming Tuesday. Sometimes we'll get like a long paragraph back from people that says like, yeah, I mean, you saved my life. I had somebody say that. It's awesome to know it's making a difference.
Matt Dibble for VOA News, Sunnyvale, California.
After years of uncertainty and economic hardship brought by erratic weather and trade disputes, grain commodity prices are booming as U.S. farmers head to the fields to plant this year's crops. It's news that brings both hope and concern for farmers. VOA's Ken Faribault reports from Illinois.
Illinois farmer Reed Thompson took over his family farming business in 2019 amid deepening tensions between the U.S. and key trading partners. A time when demand and profits for U.S. corn and soybeans were tanking.
My career into full-time farming was rather stressful.
To reduce the stress, the U.S. Department of Agriculture sent direct aid totaling tens of billions of dollars over several years to farmers like Thompson. It helped keep them afloat not just amid trade turmoil, but also during the coronavirus pandemic, so that they could farm another day like this cool and dry April morning when Thompson planted his soybean seeds. As his tractor cuts through the fertile soil, prices for his crops are reaching decade highs, a dramatic change from just a year ago.
I would say 30 to 50% higher than what we were 12 months ago. And so, first time in several years that farmers can plan on profit without government money.
The government money helped Thompson offset the dent in his profits influenced by the Trump administration's tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminum. The tariffs prompted China, one of the largest markets for U.S. soybeans, to slap escalating tariffs on U.S. grain exports, among other goods.
Those policies that, featured a lot of tariffs and retaliation weren't very helpful. But I think we've dug out of that hole and we've started to see some gains. So we're hoping to keep that momentum going.
Adam Nielsen is the National Legislative Director for the Illinois Farm Bureau. He works with members of Congress and the White House to advocate for policies that help the U.S. agriculture industry.
In terms of seeing expanded trade, we don't care who's in the White House. That is one of our priority issues. It was under Trump. It will be under Biden.
Nielsen credits the Trump administration's Phase 1 agreement with China and the United States, Canada, Mexico trade agreements, or USMCA, for helping boost demand and prices this year. He says U.S. lawmakers should set their sights on new trade agreements.
There are countries and there are regions of the world that are entering the middle class for the first time. Sub-Saharan Africa, for example. Those are the markets where there's potential growth.
And, with Biden coming in, there's opportunities to strike deals with the UK, Korea, Japan, and others.
Thompson says he's been able to sell some of the grain he's been storing since last year's harvest at today's high prices. But Farm Credit Illinois Regional Manager Caleb May says many farmers might not be able to cash in.
We may have high prices today, but you may not have anything to sell for those high prices.
Thompson says there's also a downside to high prices.
As our commodity prices go up, so does everything else.
Thompson expects costs to run his farm to go up 15% this year.
But am I going to end up in a better position now than I did at the end of last year?
For now, the answer is as uncertain as the long-term weather forecast. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Gibson City, Illinois.
The Oscar-nominated documentary Hunger Ward by award-winning filmmaker Sky Fitzgerald chronicles doctors' struggle to save lives of starving children in conflict-ridden Yemen. VOA's Penelope Pulu spoke with the Oscar nominee and filed this report.
In Yemen, a civil war there has created a humanitarian disaster.
For every child killed by bombs and bullets, dozens are starving to death.
This could be the world's worst famine in 100 years.
Oscar nominee Sky Fitzgerald tells VOA about his experience filming inside the ill-equipped children's hospitals in the war-torn area.
where you really truly learn the heart of the matter is by going to the original source or to the event itself. And I listened to the mother whose child is on the cusp of death because she can no longer afford to buy food for her child.
Skye Fitzgerald says diesel shortages from Saudi Arabia's sea blockade of Yemen leaves hospital diesel generators without fuel.
So if you don't have diesel for those generators, you can imagine what starts to happen, from the lights to the refrigerators that store food to the lab, where they store the blood. The whole sort of medical apparatus which supports these clinics and hospitals shuts down.
Children with severe acute malnutrition, or SAMs, require specialized diets to recover. Some, like Omeima, recover. Others do not. The filmmaker says understaffed clinics depend on family members to care for these very fragile children. This often leads to tragic outcomes because relatives don't always understand doctors' instructions.
It adds this whole nother layer that is just heartrending, because here's this loving grandmother who's trying to do the right thing for her grandchild, and yet it contributes to the death of the child.
Hunger Ward is Fitzgerald's third documentary on a humanitarian crisis. The first, entitled 50 Feet from Syria, focused on the civilian impact of the Syrian conflict. The second, Lifeboat, followed refugees' perilous trek on rubber boats from the coast of Libya through the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. Fitzgerald hopes to raise awareness of Yemen's famine.
Sort of like a moral imperative to find some way to try to make this invisible war visible, or at least more visible to the broader audience in the West. Because I think it's so often, if you ask the average American, they probably couldn't point on a map to where Yemen is.
U.S. lawmakers are calling on the Biden administration to urgently push Saudi Arabia to lift restrictions on imports to Yemen, where the United Nations says nearly 50,000 people are already starving to death. Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington. I am Shaka Sali. Straight Talk Africa, we call it like it is. We discuss issues that reflect the interests of our audience without fear or favor. We are guided by facts, and I look at myself as a servant of nothing but the truth.